involved with the water resources career because I always felt a real connection to the outdoors and also to rivers and nature. And I pursued a conservation management degree at Upper Iowa University, and I feel like I had a real awakening when I was in college of what our water resources issues were in our state. And that led me to go into working with private landowners after I realized that majority of our land in Iowa was privately owned. That might have been a little naive as far as making large impacts on our landscape and not knowing the full breadth of and being aware of our political challenges in our state. But it's always been just really rewarding to work with the networks of water resource professionals and with the landowners directly making impacts on the land. Furthering into my career, I decided that I wanted to run for soil commissioner in Washington County where I live, and just working within soil and water conservation districts for about 10 years really inspired me to run for that seat.
I'm not quite sure how I got into the water resource field. I think it just kind of happened. When I went to college at the University of Iowa, I knew I wanted to do environmental work, and that had come from time in my childhood playing in the creek or exploring. So I knew I wanted to do environmental work, but I had no idea what that meant. So my first internship was with soil and water conservation, and I thought, wow, this is so awesome. I can't believe people get paid to do this. So I got to spend time out in the country, in farm fields, helping farmers put conservation practices on their land. And my first job ended up being with the Scott County Soil and Water Conservation District, doing urban work. So I kind of fell into it, but with every job I took, I kind of identified the things that I liked. And so going into my urban conservation work, I thought, I really like this type of work. It's really diversified. It's a new and growing field. There's a lot of opportunities for innovation, and that kind of kept me turning in that direction. So that's how I kind of ended up in the job I'm at now with the city of Coralville, doing environmental work for them. That involves water resource planning, also compliance work, and managing their EPA permit.
I was working in conservation and doing a lot of land management prior to being a watershed coordinator, and I knew that I wanted to help have an impact on the land, specifically in wildlife habitat. And then I kind of fell into it when a job opened at our local county park to do some watershed planning for them up in Story County. And during that planning, I realized how much of an impact you can have on the landscape by helping and working with private landowners. So that kind of developed. I moved from project to project and ended up where I am now, where I work with farmers in 3 different counties, putting in water quality practices on their farms. And that can be anything from saturated buffers to treat tile outlets for nitrates to wetlands for wildlife habitat, or grazing plans, or pretty much anything in between.
I was born on a small farm in Iowa, and I started out working on a construction company with my dad. And sometime in my 20s, I realized construction's hard, and my body started hurting, my back and my knees, and so I gave that up, went back to school, went into environmental engineering, and in the summer of 2008, I was lucky enough to get a early graduate project and followed the flood of 2008 floodwaters down to the Gulf of Mexico and helped some folks measure the dead zone on a scientific vessel. And that was a pretty life-changing experience. There was a hurricane involved, and it was pretty exciting. And it was nearly a record-sized dead zone. And all the researchers down in Louisiana kept referring to the nitrogen and phosphorus that came down the river as my nutrients, because I was the guy from Iowa. And it was it was pretty life-changing to experience the global scale of how we do things here and it affects things elsewhere, and really learned the importance of clean water and how we all live downstream from somebody else. So kind of set the path forward from there on out.
My inspiration for water really got started with an environmental issues class I took in college, and I had a really inspiring instructor at Hawkeye Community College, Dawn Keller, and I guess that was just when I was going for my associate's degree. Wasn't sure where I really wanted to head, but just felt really connected with that class and realized how many opportunities and needs there are in the world. And it was after that class I talked to an advisor and was recommended about earth and environmental science as avenue to get involved in the water world, and that really set up a lot of different things for me. Through college, I had an opportunity to do hydrology, water quality, air quality, geology, kind of all of those different classes. But I'll say getting outdoors was really the inspiration. And I guess even with my role at the laboratory, it was heavily focused on water. And so I think that really just, opened up the doors for me getting a job as a watershed coordinator, having that background experience, as well as the love for it, being outdoors, recreating, canoeing, kayaking. There's just so many connections to water that it's hard not to end up there, I guess, almost. And especially with the needs and opportunities here in our state, I think just was a call to action for me almost.
My background has a windy path, but I've been in municipal work for almost 15 years. I came from the city of Cedar Falls, where I did similar stormwater work that I do now, but I have my degree in ceramics, which I got before that, and a degree in civil and construction engineering technology. My interest in career in water has been evolving over time. I started off in the construction industry, where I sort of got to see part of the ills of the system and lack of education on a lot of people's parts, different industries, in relation to water and pollution prevention, and that really piqued my interest in that regard. So that's when I went to pursue the degree in civil and construction engineering technology, and I started off as an engineering project inspector for subdivisions, and that slowly morphed into more of the stormwater management aspect of it, and construction site pollution prevention and control, and then training in the community for contractors and folks that pour concrete and that type of thing. And it just sort of evolved over the last 15 or so years to where we are today, where we manage a lot more than just sediment and erosion.
I've been doing work in the watershed field for a little over 5 years. Before that, I was a landscape designer, so the two match up pretty well together. I wanted to get into something that was more conservation oriented. I first got interested in water quality back in, I think, 2008. I was working in landscape design, and a year or so earlier to that I heard about this idea of a rain garden, and I was kind of curious about that, and went to a couple of classes and became certified. And one of the reasons I liked the rain garden idea, and then bioretention cells and permeable pavers and really most of the green infrastructure projects, was it helps recharge groundwater. Long time ago I had heard a program on Iowa Public Radio where, I don't know if it was a state archaeologist or geologist, must have been a geologist, was talking about how we're draining our aquifers. More water comes up and out than goes back into it. And so I was really excited about the idea of recharging that, a little bit at a time, albeit, but still trying to work toward that.
I am a fix-it type person. I'm always building something or repairing something, even at home. And so the fun thing about water resources engineering is it gives me the ability to fix things and build things while combining all of my various passions for clean water and getting kids and public in contact with natural resources and good clean spaces. I really like working at UR because it gives me the ability to work with a team that really values restoring natural spaces with natural processes and a good solid foundation in ecology. So all those pieces come together and make it a really good thing to do day in, day out.
I would say probably one of the things I'm most proud of, I guess, is just the people I've been able to connect with. Through my role as a watershed coordinator, I've had the opportunity to work with farmers and producers that care about the land and are looking for opportunities to help protect it. I've also been able to work with residents and businesses that are looking at better ways of managing water on their land, controlling flooding, improving water quality. But then I think of all the students I've had the opportunity to interact with, either through a presentation or a booth. But I think a lot of them, probably one of the coolest aspects has been our rain garden initiative, working and training students from kindergarten all the way through college on what a rain garden is, what its purpose is, and then giving them the opportunity to get involved, coming out and picking up a shovel, digging a hole in the ground, and kind of seeing a landscape change from just normal grass into this water quality feature. And the homeowners that are going to benefit from it, but also the community that benefits from it. And thinking about how many students wouldn't have had any exposure to a rain garden is, I think that's really just been really awesome, seeing people get excited about being outdoors, about having a positive impact on their community, and seeing an end product that every time they drive by, when they see the flowers bloom up, knowing that they had an impact on their community.
Well, thus far, I think the moment is right now, and that will also change over time, but I'm in a unique position where I've been able to chair the Partners of Scott County Watersheds 501c3 group in the area, and that's been quite an honor and a pleasure. And through my job, I also get to manage many different aspects of our stormwater program and be involved with the Nahant Marsh Education Center on that board. So right now, I get to have my fingers in a lot of different areas, and it makes for a really exciting time.
That's tough. I guess I have two homes, almost three. So I grew up in southwestern Michigan, so Lake Michigan is kind of my home watershed. But aside from that, I lived in Coralville for quite a number of years when I first moved back here in 1994. And where my home is located is right next to the Cedar River, about 3 blocks away in the shortest distance. So I have an affinity for all three of those watersheds, pretty closely related.
So I grew up in Iowa City and kind of on the creek banks of Ralston Creek. Spent a lot of time in my childhood exploring the creek, doing a lot of creek walking, making dams, getting muddy and dirty, and I think that really had a inspiration of going into the career that I am now. But I consider my home watershed the Davis Creek watershed. It's located in Washington County. It's was founded by Reuben Davis in the late 1830s. He was a hunter and trapper, a well-known hunter and trapper in the area, and he built the first frame house in Washington County. And his intention for that house was actually to be like a tavern. It was located along the Military North Road, so it served a lot of people. So I think it's really great to put creek sign out on our creeks in the counties and along our rivers as well. And there's always a story behind how those watersheds got their names. So that's a project that I feel pretty passionate about. And I'm working on a project just personally to explore and research how all the creeks got their names in Washington County. And my family lives on a tributary to the Davis Creek, and we spend a lot of time doing the things that I did as a child in that creek as well. So I think it's just a great way for kids to explore and use their imagination and get dirty and have fun.
I would consider my home watershed the Mississippi River watershed, and I know that's a big watershed, but my first job was in Scott County, and I was very close to the Mississippi. So at that time, I had a lot of experience spending time out on the river, boating on the river, kayaking, swimming, and all my efforts as part of my job went towards protecting that river and enhancing the stormwater that was delivered to that river. Currently, I work in the Iowa River watershed. And I live on the Cedar River in the Cedar River watershed. So all of those watersheds combined are part of the Mississippi River watershed. So I think that is why I would consider the Mississippi part of my home watershed.
My home watershed is Price Creek, and Price Creek runs from Benton County down through the historic Amana colonies right at Highway 151. So if you've visited Amana, you've probably driven over Price Creek. And I consider that my home watershed because I worked on the water quality project to help remove the bacteria impairment from that creek for about 10 years. And I've talked to every landowner, every farmer, just about everybody in that watershed, have a lot of really close relationships up there, and then ended up buying a house just, a quarter of a mile uphill from the stream. So now I impact that water as well, and that's where I recreate, that's where I hunt with my dogs, is along the banks of Price Creek, and graze my cattle uphill from the creek. And it just has very much become my home. That's not where I grew up, but it's my favorite place in the world. If you go to Amana, drive those hills up above Price Creek, because it looks very much like Jones County, big, rolling, beautiful green hills, and that's actually where Grant Wood painted Young Corn, if you're familiar with the Grant Wood painting that is on Iowa's Quarter. So come visit us sometime.
I have two answers, I guess. One is the pool in my backyard. We just have an above-ground pool, and my kids love it, and it gives me a way to play with water chemistry, and it keeps the kids inspired in water, and having them swim around in it and clean water and enjoy that, I think, is inspiring them to do similar things. I guess the second answer would be that it's all one water. There's this concept out there now, the one water, where it's all connected. Rain, rivers, lakes, streams, ponds, oceans, glaciers, it's all the same ancient product. It makes life possible. And so that's kind of one of the driving things for me, is playing a part in that big cycle of trying to keep water clean, because it's going to be around here long after us, and so all of it. The Kent Park is kind of interesting too, because technically I haven't done any work here, but we used to come here all the time when I was a kid, come fishing and swimming at the beach, and it's one of those places that just kind of inspired me as a kid, and it's always been a kind of a home away from home, sort of. So
The Duck Creek Greenway corridor that we have in the Davenport and Bettendorf area is a wonderful example of how not so disparate things can work together with our healthy waters and streams, and then the trail system that runs through. There are a series of restaurants and bars along the way, almost the entire trail. You can ride a couple miles, stop and have a drink, meet people for lunch, and I know that our family does that through the summertime, and a lot of people we know incorporate that into their recreation and leisure time. Not only, they don't just use it for transportation or for exercise. You can fill a full day on the corridor, and we always spend time in the water with our son, throwing some rocks, looking for bugs, picking up trash. So it's a big part of a lot of people's lives in the area.
I would say one project that I'm excited about, we'll be starting to break ground on here very soon, is a partnership with the University of Northern Iowa. They'll be doing some work to expand some practice fields and some conversations of this new construction. We identified that they were just looking at traditional detention basin just to manage runoff from this. But with you and I being such a wonderful partner and always looking at innovative ways to implement conservation and really serving as a demonstration site, we're looking at a component of making this a hybrid detention basin bioretention cell. And I guess why I'm really excited about this is I see lots of opportunities for this in the growing Cedar Valley. I think a lot of times, traditional water management is, put the detention basin in, manage the runoff, but missing the water quality components. So with this detention basin bioretention cell hybrid model, I'm hoping it's an opportunity for us to expand these, maybe get new developers and new businesses involved in this as an option. So that way we do get both the flood mitigation and water quality benefits.
Yeah, we've actually got a bunch of projects that are exciting coming up pretty quick here. The closest to fruition is working with Coralville, as a matter of fact. There's 3 segments of Biscuit Creek that we're going to do a floodplain reconnection with. So we're going to kind of widen out the stream bed, so there's a floodplain bench, which is a rise above where the normal water is, but gets filled up when we get heavier rain events. So those 3 sections are pretty cool. One of them is in Central Park, so it's going to be highly visible by the elementary kids in the neighborhood as well. That's pretty cool. We're going to do a similar project in Tiffin. It's actually for a private developer, though. He's purchased a parcel of land, and Buffalo Creek runs diagonally through that. And they contacted me initially to see about putting some ponds in, and through visiting the site, it looked like the pond really wasn't going to work very well for them because it was fairly flat except in a couple of areas, but it's a really huge watershed, so it would have backed up water for a lot more area than what they were bargaining for. So I suggested turning the creek into an amenity instead and reconnecting the floodplain to that. So the reconnection doesn't do much as an amenity, but we're going to be planting prairie around it, so people that buy houses in that area, probably neighboring areas too, can take walks through the restored prairie. I think that's a really exciting partnership between private and public, I think. And we've got lots of landowner ponds that are going on, and a couple of actually small landowner wetlands that people were interested in areas where they couldn't build a pond again, but they had a water table such that they could do a wetland, and had surprising interest from landowners on those.
For future projects that I am excited about, I guess for work related, that we are wrapping up the Iowa watershed approach at the Iowa Flood Center. And so I'm really looking forward to unveiling our IWA final video, and we plan to do that at the water conference next year. So that's been a really fun project to work on. We've done all the interviews, we've traveled around the state, we've gathered all our interviews, and just looking forward to telling the story of what it's been like for the past 5 years. In the meantime, behind the scenes, the university is always working on different grant opportunities as well. So we have some really exciting grant opportunities that we're working on that have to do with community engagement at the watershed level, flood resiliency, water quality, and I can't name them right now, but we're looking forward to hopefully being funded maybe next spring on some of these other watersheds that follow the Iowa Watershed Approach Framework. On a personal level, I started working with the Highland FFA agriculture instructor this past summer, and we worked on naming some of the local creeks within Washington County, the English River and the Davis Creek watershed. And we're part of that, we're developing watershed curriculum for the Highland FFA students, and then we're also the last part of the project is that we're working on naming an unnamed tributary to the English River, just east of Riverside. So that's been a really fun process to work with our next generation on that, and they're really going to be the voice going forward, and I think it's just a really cool legacy project that they get to leave with their hometown and their community and say that they had a part of naming that creek. So that's a fun project that I'm looking forward to working on.
I have the city I work for, the city of Coralville, recently purchased a property that has a fen and wetland complex along with some old growth timber, and so we're working on a plan for restoration of that property, and thinking ahead to what that's going to entail. I think it's going to take 20 or 30 years to really get that into a space that we feel we're happy with. So I'm looking forward to helping to manage that property and helping to improve it in the upcoming years. We also are looking into urban stream bank project. It's a stream bank mitigation bank project that would last into the next 20 years. So I'm looking at some long-term projects that are coming up that are pretty exciting. And then just beyond that, growing our stormwater program, getting into methods that are more innovative, ways to better manage our stormwater in ultra-urban environments is important. And, the storms that we've been dealing with over the last few years have been bigger. So we're starting to deal with more water coming our way, which is very noticeable in an urban setting where you have a lot of impervious surface. So, we're going to have to be really strategic about how we handle this and how we clean this water before we pass it on to our creeks in the Iowa River. So I'm looking forward to figuring out better ways to do that, and kind of working on the nexus of stormwater management, flood management, managing disasters, and just making our community more resilient.
A project that I'm really excited about is the scaling up of wetland installations through the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. So thanks to our legislature, the budget for wetland development in Iowa has exploded. They realize that these practices can remove nitrates from our water and help clean up the water and fix some of the issues that we've seen the last few years. So they were generous enough to send us that funding to get these wetlands built, and we're going to be working at a scale that we've never done before. So the team is working really hard on some planning right now to figure out how we're going to implement this program and how we're going to get it to work. But I'm really excited because the impact that this kind of funding and ability to build these structures will have on Iowa, not only for the nitrate reduction, but for wildlife habitat and places for, your grandkids to recreate and stuff like that, is just absolutely amazing. So it's coming, but we're really pumped.
Well, right now we have our team just started a couple days ago. We've got a stream bank stabilization project, which is not anything brand new, but as part of this one, we're incorporating some lunkers for fish habitat, and then also we're going to grade in a path for a small boat access and launch. So think small boats like kayaks and canoes. We'll also have some, a kind of limestone outcropping, which we don't really have right in this immediate area, but to provide some seating for people to go fishing, since we'll have that improved habitat, and hopefully try to get people down to the water. We know that people will appreciate things that they have spent time with, and Duck Creek is rather incised, and so it's hard for people to get down to the water's edge. So this is our pilot project, and hopefully the first of many accesses for people and for small boats.
To be honest, all of them. All the projects we've got going, big or small, they're all an opportunity to learn something new and a new, different application of the things that we do. New opportunity to teach something new to somebody else. That said, I really enjoy public park projects. It's kind of a passion of mine, the ability to work on a place where kids and people can get in contact or exposed to high quality, happy, healthy water is a lot of fun to enhance that experience for folks and get kids excited about natural spaces. I always like those kind of projects, and I've got a few of those coming up and really excited to make those great places.
If somebody was interested to getting into the water resource field, I would encourage them to just jump in and expect that there's going to be challenges and failures along the way. I know the three of us have learned as we've gone, and it's to don't get discouraged and be hopeful for the future, and just to work really hard and get involved as much as you can. This isn't a 9-to-5 type of job. I mean, we're invested and have extreme passion for the conservation and water quality and our natural resources in our state. I mean, Rose is out traveling the world and looking for water quality solutions at other countries and how we can adapt here in Iowa. And Amy is on the local level making policy changes and land management impacts in a big way, especially in our urban conservation field. So I would really encourage people to build your network and of trust, and that I know that I can trust these two and I can rely on them and lean on them, and you need that network when you're in the water resource field. So I would say jump in and get involved with as much as you can.
If somebody's interested in joining this field, one of the first things I would tell them is be prepared for the roller coaster, right? Because we do something different every day. You might be working with a landowner on Monday, running a field day on Tuesday, writing a newsletter on Wednesday. What do you do on Thursday and Friday? Survey for a practice, and then maybe you're working on design the last day of the week. I don't do design on Friday, but some people do. So the nice thing about the job is it's not boring. You get to do something different every day. And most of these positions, most of these practices, you can kind of mold them into something that you really enjoy and are really passionate about. So that's been my favorite part about the job. The nice thing in Iowa is that we're trending up on opportunity for people to work in the water world. We've got more funding for projects, more interest policy-wise in fixing some of our water quality issues, and really we're taking the bull by the horns and trying to address everything that's going on. So the field is open, and we'd love to have you join us.
My advice would be get involved with as many things as you can. Diversify. So there's a lot of different avenues in the water resources field. The three of us have very different jobs, but we still work together a lot. So you're able to have a community of people around you that have jobs within the water resource field, but have a little bit different niche. So there's a lot of niches out there, and you never know who's going to be hiring. So learn as much as you can in all these different fields. Also, that's the way you find out what you like to do the best. So just diversify, get yourself out there. Also know that if you're passionate about this work and you think you're in for the long haul, one of the most important resources that you have is yourself. So make sure that you're working for an entity that's doing work that you believe in, that you have longevity there. And when I say that, I mean that they're providing you with a quality of life that allows you to continue in that job long term. So, take care of yourself, make sure you're somewhere that will help provide education to you, will allow you to go to conferences, allow you to network, allow you to go to different types of training so that you can continue to build your resume, because you will probably go through a few different jobs before you find out where you want to be long term.
It's really rewarding when things get going and you start to see some change, even though change may be small in your own eyes. Small changes add up to be big changes, and it's a pretty broad field. I mean, it's good to know a little bit about psychology. It's good to know a little bit about sociology. It's good to know about conservation and how the natural world works and how plants grow and how business works. And it seems like I'm only scratching the surface with that. But I think most people that are interested in this type of work realize that everything's not going to change at once. So if you can keep your eye on incremental changes and push that increment as hard as you can, but still know that things are going to change slowly over time.
So that's a focus that we've had here in Dry Run Creek and the surrounding area for a while now, recognizing that our local policymakers have an active role in what we're able to do with conservation. So I think the number one thing we try and do is educate and get them involved. And so, whether that's a presentation at City Council to highlight conservation that's going on, to bring up potential issues and highlight the opportunities on the horizon. I think that that's a really good way to start the involvement, is that education is such a key component. And then I think once they're aware of it, then you really open up the doors for how they can actively be involved, whether that is, starting new initiatives, whether that's modifying ordinances. It really opens up the doors. So I think working closely with city staff is important, because they have to be on board with it, and they really go hand in hand. If you can get one or the other involved, it makes it a lot easier to try and make change feasible.
I think the most effective way to communicate with decision and policymakers is to get their attention. And for me, the easiest way to get their attention is to tell your story. So tell your story. If you work for a city, tell your residents' story, but connect them to what this funding means. So if you're requesting funding for conservation programs, describe to them what that would look like and what that would mean to the people who are receiving this service. Also, sometimes when you tell a story, people tend to remember it. So I think that you can paint a picture that way.
I totally agree with Amy. When you are wanting to get a point across to decision makers, or you need to communicate something, that you have to make that connection. And before you can even do that, I feel like you really need to put the time into building relationships and building trust. And most of my job is behind the scenes, and it is doing that and building those relationships, because you never know when an opportunity or a challenge is going to come your way, and to have that relationship built before going into it is essential. So really take the time outside of just your regular duties to build those connections with the decision makers, whether they're local or state or even federal decision makers. So that really builds that trust. And then I think also the other item is really making it personal. What's that personal story, that personal connection, not only just to you, because sometimes when you're working in the environmental field, it's easy for people to label you. So really trying to get involved with other organizations that have effective communication as well, and whether that's land trusts or Pheasants Forever or watershed groups. There's many different avenues that you can advocate for conservation on a personal level as well. And trying to tell your story as a user of our natural resources and encourage other users to also tell their story and how their decisions impact them as a user. So
I just want to say one thing. Kate's totally right about that, and I think she really nailed it. And I can't think of anyone I know who does that better than Rose. So Rose is able to work on both sides of the aisle, as they would say. She works with farmers, conservation groups, urban and agricultural landowners, and I think that she's been really inspiring to the other women in this field, and men, sorry about that, that are building relationships, because it really is important. And I feel like she's gained a lot of trust with a whole lot of different conservation and commodity groups through her relationships with them.
You're gonna make me cry. I think these gals hit the nail on the head there. When you're working with policymakers or leaders and you need to inspire change or inspire some movement, you got to know your topic throughout, know what you're asking for, make it personal, just like you said. Make it personal not only by telling your own story, but by getting the community to connect with nature. And that means supporting other groups. Like Kate said, it might be Pheasants Forever, it might be your local conservation board that are getting people outside and looking at the bats and the bees and the bugs and shooting a pheasant or whatever it might be, so that they make a connection with the land, because I think we've lost that. And really our farmers probably have the closest connection with the land compared to a lot of the people living in town right now. And so we need to bring everybody together and get them out on the landscape. And you might decide that you love bugs. You might decide that you love shooting birds, whatever it is, as long as it gets you outside. You will then inspire that in other people, and that's contagious. So I'll recap on that. So know your topic, make it personal, tell your story, and get others outside so that they can help tell that story for you.
I think we need to talk about economics and quality of life and what attracts people to an area. Water is the basis for everything. So it's the foundation for our healthy ecosystems. It can bring in tourism with our water resources for boating, for fishing. Different populations, different generations want different things out of their community. They want to be able to have time off and spend time in nature. So incorporating greenway corridors with healthy waters and healthy tree canopies and everything in the environment is really going to make those things possible. You're going to bring in dollars to your local restaurants and bars if you've got a nice greenway trail system, especially when it's connected to water. People want to have nature in their lives, and in urban environments especially, that can be tricky to do. And I also think we need to discuss it on more of a systems-wide thinking. We're not separate from the environment. Healthy water is not a separate issue from having properly functioning sanitary sewers or regular solid waste pickup. It's part of a healthy system overall.
I guess I feel that stormwater and environmental conservationism and clean water initiatives are kind of moving in the same pattern as sanitary water treatment and industrial pollution controls did. At first, they were seen as too expensive to be possible to implement, and job killers, and just not feasible. But in time, we have found that all those industries and regulations created millions of jobs worldwide, and they made a better place overall for all of us to live. And so I guess just looking at lessons from the past, stormwater ordinances and regulations that help guide the way that we build the rest of our community from here on out can protect and preserve what we've got. And there may be some expense, but it's not too expensive to be feasible, and it's worth it. Just like those other initiatives, it's turned out to be worth it.
Yeah, I look at it that water is a basic building block of all of life. Everything that's living requires water, and from the tiniest microorganism to us and larger creatures as well. The cleaner we can make it, the better off we're all going to be. I look at the whole thing as a system, right? And water's a big part of that system. And I think in past generations, people looked at the amount of water and thought, well, we can just dilute everything and everything's going to be okay. Well, we've reached a point where we're done diluting stuff and we're just adding to a problem. And we have to really work toward reducing that effect in the future, so future generations can have clean water and don't have to buy my most hated thing, bottled water. Just to know that it's safe. I think every person deserves to drink clean, safe water.
Well, I think historically a lot of focus has been on flooding prevention, which is a very important cause. But I also think more people are coming around to the idea that water quality is also important. Many people in Iowa get their drinking water from aquifers, where the water may be cleaner. In this area, we get our drinking water from the Mississippi River, which has had its own set of challenges. If we can improve the water quality in our streams and conveyance systems that lead down to the river throughout the upper Mississippi River Basin, ultimately we'll use less processing chemicals, less time and energy to process the water that we drink, because it's all connected. And I think people are coming around to the idea, and more education has been provided from the federal, state, and local level on why that's important.
I think one of the best ways to get to the heart of the matter is identifying that everyone has a role to play. And I think that's something we've really focused on here in Dry Run Creek, having both an urban and a rural watershed, that no matter where you live, no matter how large your land is, everyone has a role to play. And so when we work with a farmer and producer to put cover crops on the land for the first time, we're out there promoting it, we're highlighting, we're putting a sign up nearby, we're posting it on social media, because we want to highlight that folks are getting involved. When we install a rain garden, whether it's a 50 square foot rain garden, might only treat 6,000 gallons of stormwater runoff each year. That's something to still highlight, because that's an active step that someone took to show that conservation was important to them. And then when we have the opportunities for a big conservation practice, like a stormwater wetland or a permeable paver parking lot or a bioretention cell, highlighting those, getting a sign installed and showing that, you know, this business or this institution values water quality. They're concerned about flooding and want to take an active role to ensure that they're not having a detrimental impact to their neighbor downstream. So I think when we have these opportunities for conservation, highlighting them and showing that recognition that this person got involved, but you can get involved too. And we're here to help. We're here to make it feasible, whether that's through financial incentives or providing the technical assistance. And I think a lot of times that's maybe a barrier for some people, not knowing that there's opportunities for this conservation, but then if they are aware of it, how we can help them. So getting them connected with contractors, identifying what conservation opportunities might be a good fit. I think it kind of all comes together, but I think it really, at the heart of the matter, it's showing folks that they have an active role in it, no matter how big or small, because we all live in a watershed. At the end of the day, that's what it is. We all live in a watershed, and we can have a positive impact on that for everyone.